It's 3 a.m. in New York City. On a quiet street, a man in jeans and a green hoodie is trying to break into an apartment. Before he can get inside, the shadowy figure lurking above interrupts him. The hood looks up, completely terrified, as the stranger jumps down to join him. Spider-Man is here to save the day. He kicks the thug away, ready to beat him into the ground for this attempted break-in. But before he can, the thug has a surprise for Spidey. He's not a thug. This was a police sting operation to catch the illegal vigilante. Searchlights clank on as the NYPD SWAT officers train their guns on Spider-Man. Freeze! Hands up, Parker! Spidey doesn't fight back, the police leading him away in cuffs. Still, he tries to warn them against taking off his mask. The lead officer, Detective Fogg, isn't worried. Everyone knows that Spider-Man's Peter Parker at this point. But as he pulls off the mask, he's greeted with a big surprise. I'm not Peter Parker. I'm Ethan Myers. This Spider-Man's some scrawny-looking kid. He can't be more than a teenager. Just seeing this is enough to give the detective a headache. And next morning, it gives the Daily Bugle a new headline. Spider-Man spawns copycat. Detective Fogg takes Ethan into interrogation, trying to get some answers out of him. He doesn't have much to share. A strange man drove up to him in a car and just offered the young man a chance to be a superhero. Ethan got in and the stranger pumped some kind of knockout through the air conditioning. The next thing Ethan knew, he'd woken up in a hospital bed, hooked up to an IV. The stranger told him not to panic, claiming the young redhead had begun to evolve. Ethan could feel that it was true. His body was changing. He was able to gain Spider-Man's wall-crawling powers. Ethan kept practicing for about 3 weeks sealed away. The stranger gave him food and kept talking to him through the intercom, telling Ethan that he could be Spider-Man. Eventually, the strange man handed him a Spider-Man costume, telling him to go out and try to do some good. The next thing Ethan knew, he was on a rooftop wearing the costume. He figured he'd at least try and act like Spider-Man. He wanted to see what it'd feel like. He doesn't have the original's web shooters, but Ethan got everything else. Fogg asks him for any details on who the man was that gave him these powers, but Ethan doesn't have anything to share. Even if he knew stuff about the benefactor though, Ethan's grateful to him. He feels he was his savior. Fogg's not convinced this mystery guy was doing good though, and was trying to contact Ethan's parents back in Cincinnati. The kid ran away from home and didn't want to hear from them. For now, he's going to spend the night in lockup with Fogg planning to ask him some more questions tomorrow morning. Outside the prison, the real Spider-Man is swinging in, now back in his black costume. He crawls up to Ethan's cell looking to talk to him about why he pretended to be Spider-Man. But as Spidey looks in, he stops talking. Something weird is going on with Ethan. His night blankets are twisting and contorting. He begs Spider for help, and that's all Peter needs to hear. He rips the wall off the prison, ready to get in there and do whatever he can. Now inside the cell, Peter uses his webs to pull the fake Spider-Man's bedsheets away. While his face remains normal, his body is twisting, mutating into some kind of flesh monster. Peter doesn't know what's going on. He asks Ethan when this started, but the kid's in too much pain to talk. Peter has no idea how to handle this, but with Ethan writhing in pain on the ground, he's only got one option: get him help. The prison guards aren't paying much attention. It's the graveyard shift after all. Finally though, one of them spots Spider-Man in Ethan's cell. As Spidey tries to wrap up the mutating kid, ready to take him away for treatment, the guards show up. One pulls his gun on Spider-Man while the other tries to open the cell as fast as he can. Spidey points out that he's just trying to help the kid, but the cops are panicking. Now they've seen Myers is mutating, they just figure Spider-Man's responsible for that too. He did just break in here after all. Rather than try to argue, Spidey just tells them that he's headed to Metro General Hospital, yelling at the pair to call ahead and get Reed Richards there to help. With that done, he jumps out of the cell, swinging away, intending to help this kid or die trying. The guards go along with Spidey's request, but they call Detective Fogg too, hoping to lay a trap for the wall crawler at Metro General. 35 minutes later, Fogg has the whole hospital full of cops, ready to arrest Spidey once he delivers the kid. Fogg's assistant, Silas, points out that if Spider-Man was responsible for this, it doesn't make sense he'd put himself at risk to save Myers. Plus, Spider-Man's an experienced vigilante. He'll probably expect the police to have some kind of trap ready for him. And indeed, 2 buildings away from Metro General, Reed Richards and Nurse Palmer are waiting on a rooftop. Spidey called Reed separately to set this up, and while it took him a bit longer to avoid the police and give Myers a smooth ride, he's finally here. Reed's shocked to see the state Ethan's in, but he and Palmer are willing to help, taking his body away and promising to call Peter back when they have news. Rather than waiting around for news, Peter swings off. There's still more he can do here. His next stop is Dr. Kirk Connor's lab. The biologist is happy to help analyze the fluids left on the blanket. Peter doesn't know what turned Ethan into a monster, but figures Connors can work it out. Kurt agrees, musing grimly that his past as a lizard makes him all too familiar with monsters. Now he's got Reed Richards working to save Ethan and Connors looking into what caused this. Peter swings off again. He's just got one question left. Was this a one-time thing, or the start of something bigger? And as he's wondering that, another fake Spider-Man starts swinging through the city. The kid laughs out loud in his excitement, unable to believe that he's really Spider-Man now. But as he lets go of this web line, fake Spidey number 2 realizes a problem. He misjudged this jump and couldn't reach the next ledge. The kid stretches out for it desperately. He just needs to make contact to cling to it. On the street, onlookers see what's going on. They gasp in fear as they realize Spider-Man's not going to pull this off. A couple seconds later, this new Spider-Man is on the ground, bloody and still. Onlookers have removed his mask and are confused. They might not remember Peter Parker's name, but they know Spider-Man's not Chinese. And over on the Lower East Side, an unmarked car approaches Jordan Harrison, a student of Peter Parker's from Spidey's days working as a science teacher. Jordan doesn't know why this random car pulled up in front of him, but the stranger, a man with red-tinted glasses, tells him to get in regardless. Thankfully, Jordan's not dumb enough to go anywhere with this creepy guy he doesn't even know. The stranger sighs. As is usually the case in scientific experimentation, timing is critical. So I'll be direct. I've already killed your mother, young man. If you don't get into the car and come with me right now, I'll kill your pretty girlfriend as well. Jordan's visibly shocked. He doesn't want to believe that. But Calvin Zabo notes that he only ever tells the truth before challenging Jordan. He has 5 seconds to comply. He'd better be quick. A few days later, Spidey's found another imposter in a New York alleyway. He raises his hands trying to get this new fake Spider-Man not to fight him. The other guy doesn't make eye contact, though he's able to talk at least. Peter tries to get him to come along, promising that he's got a friend working on a cure. But that makes fake Spidey finally turn around. And now that he's in the light, it's clear he's mutated into a literal man-spider with a fully arachnid head. Yelling that Peter's just jealous, Man-Spider punches Peter in the chin before crawling up the wall, claiming Spidey wishes he was like Man-Spider. Peter jumps after him, yelling at the fake that he's dying. If they don't treat this transformation, the mutation's going to be lethal. And that's enough to make Man-Spider finally pause. In no time, Spidey has the guy in Kirk Connor's lab ready for treatment. Dr. Connors is optimistic about this. Having a live subject to test will speed up his work on the antidote. Kurt's found the science relatively simple, and he's convinced he's already close to a cure. Until then, he offers help on another matter. Peter's Aunt May. Connors heard about her getting shot and offers to do anything he can to help. Peter's silent before finally telling Kurt to simply pray. He puts a brave face on it, claiming May will fight her way back. Kurt should just concentrate on finding a cure for the fake spiders. While he does that, Peter will keep working on catching the fake Spider-Man. 6 days after that, Detective Fogg is sitting in front of a cell, sipping on his coffee. He breaks down what's going on for his prisoners. They're all homeless, males aged 13 to 18. They were all abducted non-violently by a guy, taken to an unknown location and kept there for days to weeks. While at this unknown location, the kidnapper gave them all Spider-Man powers, then let them free to run around New York as Spider-Man. And there's a lot of them. Fogg has 9 different Spider-Men locked up in this cell, with no 2 of them having the exact same costume. They were all brought to him by the real Spidey, webbed up and ready to be put away. And now, Kirk Connors has shown up, ready with his cure. Fogg introduces him to the fake Spideys as the man who's going to save their lives, insisting they listen to him closely. Meanwhile, Peter's trying to take down another fake who's fighting back, calling the original Spider-Man a criminal and a coward. Peter nurses his jaw, but claims he rolled with a punch. Before the kid can react, he shoots both web lines right at him, wrapping this newest fake up before swinging away. Back at the lockup, Connor starts explaining the situation to the Spider-Man. The formula they've been given has initial positive effects, but the longer it remains in their system, the more it'll end up transforming them. One of the spiders asks what that means. Fogg tells Connors to make it clear to the kids. The doctor admits that they're all going to end up turning into spider hybrids eventually. Either their benefactor wants them all to die, or didn't foresee this happening. Thankfully, Connors has an antidote. a new chemical that will stop the fakes from changing any further. Unfortunately, some of the Spider-Men aren't that cooperative. They want to keep changing, and some are willing to die rather than lose their powers. They were homeless kids who got superpowers. They're not willing to go back to feeling weak, and they're used to being treated like they're not human. That idea leaves Dr. Connors speechless for a second. But while he feels bad, he's not going to give the kids a choice. He won't let them die because of some mad science experiment. They can have it in a needle or via a dark gun. The choice is up to them. As the Spideys throw up their hands in frustration, Silas has news for Detective Fogg. Another fake Spidey's just been delivered out front. And in a hidden location made to resemble a typical teenage bedroom, Jordan Harrison is not doing well. He grabs a chair, praying to God as he brings it down on the viewing screen. Pleading, Jordan pulls the chair above his head and smashes it down a second time. Nothing. Getting more desperate, Jordan pulls back, bringing the chair to the far side of the room and swinging it at the screen. Next, he tries a running start to his overhead smash, screaming at the thing to break. And finally, with a crack, the chair breaks. Jordan's still trapped. He hasn't even managed to scratch the screen. Falling to his knees, the unfortunate teen sobs. He just wants to know why. Why would someone do this to him? From outside the test chamber, Calvin Zabo has a simple answer. It's because he's just like Peter Parker. And that makes Jordan the perfect subject. The day after this, Peter meets up with Reed Richards incognito in a Mexican restaurant close to Times Square. Reed has good news. Ethan Myers is alive and stable. He's gotten the formula from Connors to reverse his condition. Reed is a bit offended by Peter bringing in another scientist, however, pointing out that he could have made an antidote himself. Peter counters that he had a life to save, to which Reed answers he's managed more than that. While examining Ethan, Dr. Richards found a tracking device surgically embedded under his skin, one of Peter's old spider tracers. Whoever did this, they wanted to keep an eye on the Spider-Man after they were released. It's like tagging and releasing animals into the wild. That's bleak, but it gives Peter an idea. He can use the spider tracer to track whoever's monitoring them. It could help him find the person behind the experiment. He gets up, but before he can leave, Reed reaches out a hand. He wants Peter to know he's not alone in this. Pete's still cold, pointing out that Reed and Tony made him alone, thanks to the Civil War. I only meant... Susan and I want you to know that you and your family are in our thoughts and prayers. If one more person tells me how bad they feel... Peter pauses. He's not being fair. He turns back with a smile. I appreciate that, Reed. Every little bit helps. Before he heads off, Reed has one last bit of information for Peter. There was dust and silt on Ethan's body that reminded him of samples he took from one of the Mole Man's monsters during a fight in New York's subway. That's good enough for Pete. He's down there and tracing the signal back in no time. In his lab, Calvin Zabo is making an audio log. Spider Project, day 18. My peers won't understand. I need to understand. A 15-year-old boy somehow acquires the proportionate speed, strength, and agility of a trapdoor spider and decides to do good. An adolescent boy is granted enormous power and chooses not to abuse it. How does such a thing happen? Zabo believes all people have good and evil within them. As such, he figures it's a coin flip. If they were given Spider-Man's powers, an equal number of people would use them for evil. He wanted to test this out, see if his beliefs are right. That's why all the subjects are teenage boys from the streets. Zabo's trying to be scientific about this and make all these other Spider-Men as close to Pete as he can. Peter was orphaned at an early age. Homeless kids are essentially parentless. His subjects were given food, shelter, and kindness by an older benefactor, like Peter was taken in by Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Give them the same costume, put them in New York. What would they do? Unfortunately for Zabo, he hasn't been able to test his theory. He planned to pull all his Spider-Men back in after a week to evaluate what they've been doing. But someone else locked them up. Now, though, on his security cameras, Zabo sees the original Spider-Man closing in on his lair. It's suddenly clear what messed up his experiment. The doctor pulls himself up from his seat. He's no match for Spidey, but Edward Hyde will give the wall crawler a much better fight. As Zabo starts to transform, he thinks back to Robert Louis Stevenson, the man who wrote the original tale of Jekyll and Hyde. Even now, Zabo wonders how the author knew what the formula would feel like. He clutches his head, remembering the passage from the book. The most racking pang succeeded, a grinding in the bones, deadly nausea, and a horror of the spirit that cannot be exceeded at the hour of birth or death. Then these agonies began swiftly to subside, and I came to myself as if out of a great sickness. There was something strange in my sensations, something indescribably new and, in its very novelty, incredibly sweet. Putting on his familiar coat with a twirl, Hyde grins. He's ready to hunt down Spider-Man. Down in the tunnels, Spidey's having a terrible time. He wants to be with Aunt May, to try and help her get out of her coma. Instead, he's wandering around subway tunnels, trying to play hot or cold with a spider signal tracker. But his journey may be over. Checking the device, Peter sees he just needs to go around one more corner and he'll have found the villain's lair. What he sees there makes Spidey pause in shock. Zabo set up a whole network of fake bedrooms for his subjects, filling the subway chamber with them. Spidey starts to walk through the laboratory, checking the bedroom cells one by one. They all seem to be empty. That's a good sign. He might have gotten all the fakes already. But then Jordan slams on his window, begging this new stranger for help. Spidey's shocked to see his former student here. Jordan's just as surprised that his former science teacher's come to save him. Still, Peter's happy to help the kid, telling him to back away from the glass. As he tries to smash the cell window, Jordan fills him in. The man who kidnapped him killed his mom and threatened to kill his girlfriend Madeline if he didn't go with him. Peter keeps trying to break the glass, but it's no good. It was designed to hold back people who had his spider strength after all. Trying to think this through, Spidey asks Jordan who did this. Jordan can vaguely remember the name Calvin Zabo, which immediately sets off Peter's spider sense. He turns around, calling Zabo to come out. His experiments are over. But Zabo's not the one coming down the hallway. Hyde is. He can barely fit in here, he's that muscular. Spider-Man tenses. This is escalating fast. Meanwhile, Black Cat's brought in one more Spider-Man, handing him over to Detective Fogg in person. The cop has news for Felicia. If she can, she needs to get a message to Spidey. There's one more boy still missing. Black Cat asks how he can know that, and Fogg shows her into a waiting room. Mrs. Harrison, Jordan's mother, is inside, along with Madeline. Zabo was bluffing when he told Jordan she was dead. Barely able to hold back her tears, Mrs. Harrison tells Felicia to get the message through to Jordan. His mother's still alive. Down in the subway, Spidey's backed up to Jordan's cell as Hyde keeps advancing into the chamber. As the muscle-bound Goliath charges, Peter vaults over him easily, causing Hyde to crash into the glass window of Jordan's cell. For the first time, the view screen has finally cracked. Peter tries to reason with Hyde, telling him he doesn't need to be Zabo's pawn. But the oversized villain shoulder checks Peter before he can finish his sentence. Peter manages to keep backing away, even as Hyde's rampage reduces most of the lab to rubble. Unfortunately, he's ended up on the ground, with the supervillain right above him. Peter fires a web line, one that seemingly goes right past Hyde's head, hitting the pipe on the wall behind him. Hyde grins at the apparent missed shot. But Peter pulls, wrenching the pipe away and leaving scalding hot steam coursing right at Hyde. The villain puts his hands over his eyes to cover them, buying Peter time to hobble away. He's hurt, but he can at least get Hyde away from Jordan. His one-time student, however, isn't content to stay safe. He's studying the crack before grabbing one of the broken chair legs and applying more pressure to it. In just a few seconds, he's broken through the formerly impenetrable glass. He's finally free. In the subway tunnels, Hyde is hot on Peter's trail. Spidey, however, is playing to his strengths, hiding on the ceiling before dropping down right on top of the villain. 2 quick web shots to his eyes are enough to blind him, and before Hyde can hit the guy on his back, Peter's already jumped away. Hyde doesn't try to hit Peter back. Instead, he puts his hands to his eyes and begins to pull. Peter looks on in horror as the man physically rips off his own eyelids to free himself from the webbing. Meanwhile, Jordan's found Zabo's lab. He looks over the beakers and chemicals, noting how dangerous this equipment is. Back in a fight, Hyde slams Spider-Man into the subway wall. With Parker pinned, Hyde taunts him a little. He knows about what happened to Aunt May. All of New York's criminal underworld does. Getting his second win, Peter kicks Hyde away, ready to wrap this up. But then he stops, horrified at the sight of Jordan. The young man's holding a smoldering beaker. He killed my mom. And he did something to me. He deserves to die. Hyde smiles, complimenting the boy's resourcefulness. Peter tries to calm the kid down, but it's no use. Jordan raises the chemical vial high, screaming a question to Peter. Why would Hyde get to live after everything that's happened, everything he's done? Hyde actually agrees with Jordan, only making the young man angrier. Spidey can feel empathy for the kid. He doesn't deny that Hyde deserves to die, but it shouldn't be by Jordan's hand. With that said, he fires one final web shot for the night. Later, on a rooftop, Peter explains what happened to Black Cat. Jordan's vial was full of acid, hydrogen fluoride. Most high school freshmen learn how to mix it in chemistry class. He tangled it up with his webbing, but enough of it got onto Hyde's face it almost burned it off, leaving him blind. Even with super strength, Peter was able to beat him unconscious after that. Felicia asks if this is an end to the case. They got Jordan back, Hyde's in custody, no one died. Happy ending, right? But Peter's more gloomy. Zabo's whole experiment was supposed to prove that given the proper circumstances, anyone could embrace evil. Everyone has the possibility for good or evil at their core. And Jordan proved him right. He would have killed Hyde if Peter had let him. Felicia points out that still means Peter was clear-headed enough to stop that happening. But that's cold comfort for Spidey. Jordan knows how close he came to murder. Now he'll have to live with that for the rest of his life. That sort of darkness changes a person. Check out our video on what happens to Peter when he gives into that urge himself.